We got it. We'll take notes.
Yes, but I would have one answer.
Focused. So, this is the AQM meeting. If you do not want to be here, it's now the last chance to leave the room. Everybody else will be locked in for the next hour. Okay, so we only have a short meeting today, so we're going to go ahead and start because people might want to go to the social. So, you want to show the note well? So this is the note well. It's in force in this meeting. Go ahead. So on the light sounds terrible. On the agenda today we have some shares slides. We're going to talk about last column documents. Does that do it? Still hear me? Okay, good. Sorry about that. How about now? Okay, I'll just... then there's going to be a talk on the evaluation guidelines or characterization guidelines, as the case may be, ECM benefits, and quick CODL status. So the recommendations draft is the one thing that we've been pretty close to finishing up now. All the IESG ballots are green, and I believe Martin is working with the Gen Art reviewer, Ellen Davies, right, on making sure his comments are all taken care of.
There's a lot of turkey, managed to make. So I'm not sure if you got also the last email from him, like on the last week, or you just sent this to me in private. Ah, okay. So maybe you have to double check this, because he sent an email saying that he believes some things have not been addressed. Well, I thought he sent it to everybody, but I can't.
I don't recall seeing it, so I don't know if anyone else did. So in any case, it's very nearly done, and should be able to finish it up. So we have a bunch of other working group items now, and a lot of them seem to be ready for a last call. And one of the things that I think we wanted to do today with everyone in the room was try to get a sense of how we should do this set of last calls, because we got 5 things queued up there. And, well, I think the natural order to do them in would sort of be not 5 in parallel, but but even if we do them one at a time, it'll be like the next IETF meeting before we're done with last calls. So we might have some overlap in the last calls between 1 or 2 documents at a time. But I think the natural order that we would go in would be the evaluation guidelines, the ECM benefits, probably FQ implementation, and the 2 algorithms. And thinking 2-week last calls on each. Does anyone else have some questions, inputs on the last call process so we don't overload you? And at the same time, we'd be looking for people to sign up to review each one of these, like 1 or 2 people for each document that can commit to giving us a good, solid last call review.
Well, if you want, I'll review the FQ implementation.
Since you're the author on
Yes,
that doesn't help too
that was
much.
actually a joke. Okay, so 2 weeks at a crack, that's 10 weeks. We should actually have time.
Yeah, assuming that 2 weeks is, the time it takes to collect up all the comments and close.
Well, that's what I do in V6 Ops. I just run rolling 2-week last calls.
Okay, we'll try to emulate you. So let's go down the list. Oh.
Review of the
Yeah, so let's go down the list and try to find a couple of names for each document. So is the ECM benefits one first on the list?
evaluation guide.
Evaluation guidelines, okay. So can we get somebody to tell us that they're willing to review this so that it can be...
So ECM benefits, or you're pointed at...
Either one.
So you're not here.
Okay, so I'll do ECM benefits.
Okay, that'd be great. Thanks. And Miria.
There you go.
Okay. So how about evaluation guidelines? Someone willing to commit to looking at that and making a detailed review and setting some comments?
Jim, how about you?
Great.
Anybody else?
Al Morton, okay. Perfect. So how about the FQ implementation one other than Fred? Andrew will? Okay, good.
Anybody else?
Anybody else for FQ implementation that we can count on? No. Okay, that might be okay. So how about the pi algorithm? I would hope at least the other, some of the other authors would be willing to review that. Bob, great.
Good ones too.
Stuart? Perfect. Okay. So FQ Common is, since you mentioned it, one of the ones on the list I think needs a little bit more feedback, a little bit more scrubbing and work, in my opinion, before we last call it. But certainly you don't have to wait until a last call to provide comments.
Sorry?
So can we get anyone else for Pi and Connell?
I'll take a look at that.
Perfect. Okay. So I think this is good. Now we have your names recorded, and and we will use that against you. So.
Now officially empowered to
Yeah. Just public shaming on the mailing list for not getting reviews in, I guess. The good news is, I made a review of all the documents in the last few weeks in preparation for the meeting, and I think it's one of the best sets of documents among all the working groups here. They're quite readable, and since we didn't really invent anything in the working group, it's rather easy to review them because you're looking at descriptions of stuff that's been done rather than trying to find holes in new things that we're doing and look for changes and improvements. Do you want to take us to the next slide? So one draft we've been talking about adopting was the DoxisPy draft, and there's been sort of light positive feedback about it on the mailing list, and we think that may be enough because that's about all the feedback that we've been getting on anything. And well, it's useful to the IETF to describe what was done in the Doxis spec, and I believe that it supplements the Pi draft nicely, and we should be able to sort of move it along in parallel. And I guess since we haven't seen anyone on the mailing list tell us that no, this would be a terrible idea to document, and there has been some positive support, unless someone jumps up here today and tells us not to do it, I think we're going to adopt that as a working group draft. Is there any feedback on that before we do it? Okay.
I'm against. Perhaps somebody is afraid to speak up.
Okay, so Richard thinks we should go through the hum process. So let's just do one hum. If you think we should not adopt this draft, please hum now. Silence. Okay, so we will adopt that, and hopefully we can last call that one quickly as well and add it to the pile of documents we're trying to finish up. And I think that's our last slide, right? So on to the characterization guidelines.
Okay, so this is about an update on the AQM characterization guidelines draft. So next, please. We have had some feedback in the IETF in Honolulu, and also we've got on the version 0, we've got some feedback and full review from Alfred, then some comments on the version 1 from Wolfram, and then we submitted the version 2 just the 9th March, and 2 revisions are submitted, 1 and 2, based on these feedbacks that we've got in the IETF. So they're mainly editorial work and minor fixes, but the main thing is that we've provided more clarity in the definition of the end-to-end metrics that are being defined in the draft. So they are right now they come up with a definition: what is good put, what is loss, what is jitter. So and they are citing other RFCs, and also that we have more clarity on how to report the data related to the end-to-end metric, the evaluation of the end-to-end metrics. Also, previously, the way that the draft was written, it was like that there were a lot of musts that you should, if you want to test AQMs, you must do this, you must do that. So we kind of gave a little bit of more liberty to the testers to actually come up with their own scenarios and being more of a guideline rather than an evaluation suite. And also there was one thing that in the last IETF we talked about. It was about how to actually quantify different congestion levels. So here we kind of try to come up with a more precise classification of different congestion levels for testing. And also there is an encouragement in the draft on to try to gather queue level metrics, the data related to the queue level metrics, whenever it's possible. So if you have a hardware that gives you the queue size and you can get it from the hardware, and if its impact on the AQM mechanism itself is negligible, then the draft encourages of collecting those data or number of ECN marks or whatever in the middle boxes, so whenever it's possible. Then it kind of has, the new draft, it kind of has this mindset of real-life testing things on real systems. Previously, it was written more with the mindset of simulation-based things. So, next. So, with regards to the metrics and their data measurements, we've defined a set of metrics that that their data needs to be collected. So previously, the draft was saying that you actually can choose what metrics you want to report on. So right now, the way it's written is that it actually says that you should actually report the maximum number of metrics that you can report on, and they are relevant to the context of the evaluation and to the scenario that you're evaluating. So the maximum number is like a maximalistic approach, but it's not necessarily all metrics. It depends on the context of the evaluation. And also that the evaluations should be based on the end-to-end metrics. It's good to gather the data related to the Q-level metrics, but the main layout of the evaluations should be based on the gathering data from the end-to-end point of view, and also based on the RFCs, how to measure the packet loss in the system. So we've got two methods on how to measure the packet loss, whether you assume that a packet would arrive within a certain delay bound based on the RFC 2680, and if it doesn't, then you assume that it's lost, or based on the RFC 2544, you actually count all the packets sent, and you count all the non-duplicated packets received, and then you measure what was lost. Then there are definitions of good put, one-way delay, and jitter. They're already embedded into the text. And we came up with recommendations on how, so there are a set of time intervals. If you're going to report good put over time, how are you going to do it? Different people may measure good put per different time intervals. So here it provides certain recommendations. For example, every multiple RTT you need to report a good put, but then it suggests that you pick a minimum 10 RTT or higher to actually as a measurement interval. For the delay samples, it's preferable to do it on a per packet pair or per packet if you can actually have a very fine-grained distribution of delay, or at minimum 10 samples per RTT. And all these things that a tester goes through must be disclosed and should be exactly same for all the evaluations that a specific tester is doing for the comparison of different AQM mechanisms. Next, please. Then with the network scenarios, in the previous IETF we had this discussion. Now we have incorporated that into the draft that it should investigate both asymmetric and symmetric link scenarios. With regards to the asymmetric link scenarios, it should investigate the bidirectional traffic. First, it looks at a scenario when you have the bidirectional traffic, when you have an AQM on only one direction. You may also want to look at a more complex scenario where there are two instances of AQM on both directions. And then you want to also look at the impact of the TCP ACK drops by AQM. How is it going to affect the TCP's clocking mechanism? And also, when testing, you should use the maximum buffer size, which is identical across all the tests. So just to provide some sort of coherence. And we've also come up with some form of recommendation for a traffic mix, but we change it from a must to a recommendation. And that's a minimal set of traffic mix that one can use, but the tester could come up with a more complex set of traffic mix scenarios. A rather more critical part of this graph is how to define different congestion levels. Andrew, in the last IETF, provided a link on a paper. We tried to read it. It was highly complex mathematically, and it actually was very difficult to translate it into something that is quantifiable under every link. So we came up with, so previously it was using a certain packet loss ratio, assuming that if you have had a drop tail queue, So it would have translated to a certain level of congestion. We changed that into, we actually infer that packet loss into a formula from a Morris paper, scalable TCP congestion control, that would actually gives you how many number of flows on a certain path and a dropped AQ would give you a certain packet loss ratio. That doesn't mean that you actually have that packet loss on the link, but it actually gives you how the congestion level would be. Well, if you have AQM, it's going to change the congestion level anyhow, and that's actually what we want to test. Is AQM able to bring down the congestion on the link? So previously it was using actually very high percentage ratios for defining what is mild, what is medium, and what is heavy congestion. So we reduce it 10 times less, so to make it more realistic in the version number 2. Next, please. And at last, I hope it's the slides. Okay. So there was also another talk about that AQM should support ECN. So in the current version, the AQMs should support ECN, all AQMs, and the testers must discuss and describe the support of ECN in the proposal that they are testing. That's all.
Are there any comments, questions, concerns?
Very good. Sorry if that paper I referred to you was a bit too heavy. The packet loss levels. Can I suggest using I mean, you've reduced them to more realistic levels, but maybe a slightly wider spread of them would be worthwhile. Like you've got 0.1, 0.5, 1%, maybe going to, so something 0.05, 0.1, and 1.5% or something like that, because
if you have a link that is like a 100 millisecond base RTT and 10 MB, that's very classic scenario, and a BDP of buffering, then you're going to have like around 18, 19 flows for a heavy congestion, which makes sense actually. And for a mild congestion, you would have around 4 flows. And that is actually compatible to what we have in mind for that specific link scenario. But with the previous setting that was like higher, we would have like 19 flows for actually a mild congestion, which would never be a mild congestion on a 10 MB link with a 100 millisecond RTT. So it would be just very small congestion window fluctuation. So I don't know. We had to pick a number anyway. So, but yeah.
And those are at least reasonable.
But this is actually just like a guideline. So you could actually have that test, and you have a different test saying that, okay, we're testing on different loss rates or different number of flows. But this just provides a guideline of how to do it.
So I have one comment.
Yeah.
And I didn't think about it until I saw your last slide. But we should be careful that this is the guidelines and recommendations on evaluating the algorithms and not on designing the algorithms, right? So an AQM should support ECN. I don't know if that's really what we want to say, but we want to say that the tests and evaluations of AQM should enable ECN and provide the results. Right?
Yes, but I mean the designer should probably have this in
But that was the point of that was the document that is trying to go over the RFC editor queue right now on designing algorithms, right?
Whether I can volunteer to read through and see how that wording can perhaps be tweaked to separate out the evaluation criteria from the recommendations to the designers.
Yeah, I don't think it's a big deal, but
Dave Olson, Sandvine. I just apologize, I'm not entirely haven't reviewed the whole thing. I was just looking through it to find out like how many flows you would be looking at. I know like home gateway was mentioned, and 17 flows was considered a large number. But what about evaluating this on like a core router or somewhere where we're seeing like 100,000 flows, or is there a scope of this? Is this targeted to a specific domain that is a small number of flows?
It should be general, I think. But I haven't actually sit down and calculated for 100,000 flows what would
for general,
it would be, but
to recommend a general purpose algorithm, you'd want to see if it works in the different cases or what the different parameterizations.
so that one wasn't about algorithms, but more about different congestion levels, and what is the congestion level is kind of a fuzzy definition, so it could translate it into different things, and we had to kind of come up with a way of how to produce rather like a fuzzy kind of mild, medium, and heavy congestion levels. So I mean, I don't know how better this can be done or what way, but I mean, if you have a reference or anything that can help, then we are very happy to incorporate that.
So is it up to the tester to choose a number of flows that for their case and apply these guidelines to
Yes,
that?
of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, could have been on the same point. I've just looked on the draft and tried to figure out how many flows are you using and you do this correctly, that you define your congestion level as like the amount of loss you would see if you would use a drop IQ instead in the same scenario, basically, right? But that's really confusing for me. It's because like for me, as you say correctly, the congestion level depends on the AQM you're using,
AQM itself.
and so this is like,
I mean,
it doesn't really go well in my head, so why don't
Yeah.
you just remove it? Why don't you just say, like, we have heavy load, we use a large number of flows, and we just make up a number, because it's not that important which number we have, it's just a large number, and then we have a medium number and we have a small number.
Yeah, that will be scenario dependent. An example.
Does
with
it
like
have
one.
to be?
We want to test an AQM over different ranges of number of flows. So
Yeah,
I
but
would
that's what
agree
you
with
should say.
on that.
Test the AQM over a different number of ranges of flows, and that's the range you should apply. And the minimum of tests you should do is like using 2 flows, 5 flows, and 100 flows. I don't know. Come up with some numbers. That makes things much easier.
Michael Abramson. So I'm seeing some specs from typical low power home routers, and they're typically spec for like 1,000 or 2,000 flows in the NAT table. So I would say that puts somewhat of an upper bound on but I think we at least need to do hundreds of flows.
This is about more like an active flows in the queue. The ones not. I'm not sure if you have 100 active flows.
Yes, I mean, you fire up a BitTorrent client, it's going to do 100 flows maybe.
Yeah.
So, and this is a very typical use case for someone within 1 megabit. So I think it should be evaluated for that number of flows.
Actually, my understanding, excuse me, Matt Mathis, my understanding is that BitTorrent, although opens a lot of connections, most of them are idle most of the time. But anyhow, I have a draft called Model-Based Metrics before the IPPM working group, which actually touches on a lot of these same issues. And it's not in too, I don't know what the agenda is like now. Is there space in our agenda? This should be presented there. It's tight, okay.
It's Friday.
It's Friday. But because there's actually a lot of overlap between stuff that the IPPM working group is doing and this specific document.
Yeah, and I think the IPPM stuff is a little more tightly defined. This is a little more recommendation. It's not as tight of a specification, so maybe we need to build some links to IPPM material for more precise descriptions.
There's a wide gray area in some of the documents.
Sure.
Brian Trammell, IDPM chair hat on. Actually, I wanted to point at Al and ask if the review you're doing of this document is also a PMD review. Because this, I don't know if the script caught this, but this desperately needs a PMD review.
Yes, and I think the script is going on. Not coming out.
Okay. I was wondering why I hadn't seen one of those for a while.
Right.
Okay, yeah, so I don't think we necessarily need to define all of these metrics with the rigor that we've defined, for example, 2680. I think that would probably, for just these evaluation guidelines, that would probably be a waste of effort. I do think that we need to have sort of wider review of the, from outside the AQM room on the fact that you are sort of defining new performance metrics, and that those performance metrics will be used not to make operational decisions, but to make strategic decisions.
Yeah, I think it would be another way of saying it would be we're defining what some tests and things that you might look at in trying to come up with performance metrics would be. But I think I don't know what your opinion would be, but I think we're pretty far from defining specific metrics in the way that IPPM.
Actually, in parts of the draft, it actually uses the IPPM metrics.
So the basic loss and delay stuff is straight from IPPM. But just looking at and I have taken a quick look at the past. You know what? I should probably sit down and finish reading the draft and then come back.
You can submit a review, Brian, so we can add Brian's name to the list of reviewers on this one.
That would be on all of those drafts. Usually it's Thursday by the time
Yeah, my hand went up.
I actually prefer the conditional level definition in this draft compared to the previous draft, and I think it's actually independent of the tablets and everything. Good start. I mean, it says as if the AQM would be theoretical. So it's I mean, just given numbers are not really good for, in my view, for any throughput, any buffer size and such. The thing is that it is not independent of the buffer size.
The buffer size is in the formula.
Yeah,
so you have
but at least
capacity.
it's independent of the actual AQM.
Yeah.
So it's like
there is no AQM.
The kind of like.
So hi, I'm Al Morton, and I've got my benchmarking methodology co-chair's hat on at the moment. I tried there to stimulate some review from the other benchmarking folks by sharing my review with them and so forth. It hasn't been successful, but I would say there's as much overlap between this work and IPPM as there is with benchmarking methodology. So maybe we can try one more time to get some folks from BMWG to review this as well. The other comment I would make, which is on the previous slide, if you wouldn't mind just flipping back there, Wes, or Richard, thank you. Yes, traffic mix. So at least for the UDP stateless stuff, we have an RFC. The number escapes me, but it's the iMix genome, which can help here. This provides repeatability if you use different mixes. We think at least it's our best shot at repeatability. But the answer is when we test with more than one packet size, repeatability between test labs gets a little goes a little gray. Just something to keep in mind.
Me again. I just want to explain further what I meant. So, first of all, what I like about this document is that it's very clear and very focused, and I think it's really useful for people who want to do something. So I also regarding to the IPPM stuff, it should be in line with IPPM, but it shouldn't make this document more complicated. It should stay clear as it is. So that's a nice part. And so that was also why I made this proposal, because the congestion level the term itself is very confusing to me, because you calculate it based on drop tip, and then you apply, and then you get a number of flows. You apply this number of flows using a different AQM and get a different loss rate out of it, which other people would again see as a congestion level. And so it just makes, I understand what it is, but it's a weird term to me. And I also don't think that is needed. So of course, using over different bandwidth delay products, using the same number of flows will lead to what you call different congestion levels. But I also think it doesn't matter to have always the same congestion level. It's okay if you just test a small number of flows, a medium number of flows, and a maximum number of flows.
So the idea behind this was that if you've got tester A and tester B testing two different AQMs and they're using different number of flows and different links, then you want them to actually be using the same number of flows. You put the graphs in front of each other and start comparing. So,
yes,
for a certain, for a certain network path characteristics. So
basically, what we're talking about is you have a scenario. You have a certain delay. You have a certain bandwidth, right? You have let's say
certain buffer.
A certain buffer. So you have 100 milliseconds end-to-end delay, 10 Mbit link, and then you calculate your numbers of flows, and that's in this case 10. Now you take the same, and you have a different scenario, you have a smaller bandwidth. So the number you will calculate is 5, like half the bandwidth, so it's 5 instead of 10.
Yes.
What is important is that you compare the algorithms in these scenarios, like you have 10 megabits per second, 10 megabits per second, 100 milliseconds, and 10 flows, and then you compare all the AQMs. And then in the next scenario, it doesn't actually matter if you have 5 or 10 flows, but you have to have the same number of flows. And that's why I just say pick a number which is okay for all scenarios.
Not necessarily,
start
because
out the number.
certain number of flows on a certain links would translate to certain congestion levels.
I know, but why is it important to have the same congestion level? It's just
But what
important to
you're
have
trying
like
to
a
show
mild
here-
and a medium congestion level. It's not important to have exactly the same congestion level.
But that wouldn't be mild. That's the point, is that certain number of flows may be mild on a certain link, but not mild on another link. So that's the point, is that you're trying to come up with a formula that gives you that number.
Yeah, but what
how
you
many
actually
flows.
want in the end is to cover real use cases. So if you, even so, you have a large link and you only have 2 flows, or you have a small link and you have 100 flows, and that's very heavy congestion, if that's a real use case, if you really can have a link where you have 100 flows, then you should test it. I don't care about the congestion level, because the congestion level is influenced by the AQM. I care about the scenario I get, and I want to test.
So what we could do, actually, we could keep the formula, but just scrap the congestion level definitions, but keeping the formula.
So that's one thing. I find the term really confusing, but I also don't. I think that's more complicated than it needs to be. You just have to pick numbers.
Okay.
I don't care about Andrew McGregor again. I don't care about the name of it, but something of that sort of form, which takes some of the dimensions out of the problem, so that you get something comparable, is quite important. Because say I've got a scenario where the bandwidth is 10 terabits a second and the RTT is 4 milliseconds, and I want to figure out whether an AQM that worked in that situation is somewhat comparable to another situation where we had, say, I don't know, 100 gigs and a 9 millisecond RTT, right? You can actually make some kind of comparison based on what happened with this congestion level metric, because it's a relative measurement within the network parameters of the scenario. But the number of flows you require for those two scenarios is radically different, right? You know, for the 10 terabit scenario, I mean, you know, I don't know,
But
6-7 million flows is going to be kind of something that's going to be required to get it to congest, right?
Don't you really need to have that number of flows to be able to actually come up with it?
On a 10 terabit link, of course you do.
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying.
Right, Mavis. Yeah, but the way I see this problem is you've got this very large dimensionality space, and you want to simplify it. And I would suggest that one of the parameters you ought to pick is the normalized fair share rate. That is the aggregate bandwidth divided by the number of flows, I guess would be is the way I said it. But that is the parameter that's most likely to be held constant, because that's the parameter that the users care about as you scale the system. Right? So if you buy a bigger link, you can watch more channels at once, kinds of scenarios.
Just for the record, I agree to this.
So this is good feedback.
I think if we incorporate those parts, I think it's just a few parts in the draft. Can probably ask for the working group last go.
Yeah. And we have plenty of people who are on the reviewer list. Richard added everyone's name as they came to the microphone. No one's going to want to talk about the next draft.
Another one. So Gory first. So I put my name on the list. Okay, so trying to read this quickly through again. Some of the terminology here is a little bit different to what we put in the AQM guidelines recommendations guidelines. The VCP we just talked about at the beginning. Is it worth trying to align this and not talk about switches but talk about network devices? To use the same definition for AQM, because you have a kind of a more fuzzy definition, and there are things in here that we could make changes to. Happily make comments if the working group thinks that's helpful.
Personally, I think that's helpful.
Then I'm up for a review of that to do that.
consistency in our output is important, I think. Okay. Anything else you want to talk about? Okay. I guess it'll be Gory's turn to talk about Ekin.
Stand here. I'll stand with the pink box away from the camera. Okay, I'm going to talk about Ekin or ECN. Right. I need to confess at the very beginning. Michael gave me the job of doing the last edits and uploading, and I managed to mess up the upload procedure by uploading a new version of the individual submission rather than the working group one. And nobody told me any different until after the deadline had passed. Hopefully the ID tracker will now be changed to not let you do such a stupid thing, because other people have done it as well. This. Yeah, it shows up in the archive, and then we have to go and do replaces to make sure it's replaced by the right one and all sorts of silly stuff. I finally uploaded the right version, and I uploaded this version, which is version 1, with the edits that to respond to comments provided by the working group, apart from one. So let me talk about this now. Purpose. Goal of the draft is to present a vision for why people should be using ECN. If you think this is the wrong document, or you think we should be doing something different, then you need to speak up, because the purpose of this document is to present that vision. Please use ECN. It identifies the key benefits, and it could potentially identify the pitfalls. That was the second comment we got from Wes, and it calls us to think again, because talking about the pitfalls in a document which is effectively a manifesto for saying turn on ECN seems to be a little bit contradictory. This document is going to put it in the RFC series trying to say, please use ECN. We need a balanced approach, but describing current pitfalls appeared to be maybe not the right language. So I've uploaded a version 2 that tries to avoid the word pitfalls without removing those sections that talk about the bad things that can go on. It just changes the language. Now,
challenges that should be addressed.
Exactly, it uses the word challenges. Yes, good. Thank you, Matt. Have you read it?
No.
Good. Well, okay, so that's already heading in the right direction. This is mostly a rewrite. This is 01 to eat all the sections and improve readability. And hopefully the document is significantly better than the text here and is actually quite readable. We're presenting this today because we think it's now ready for wider review. In particular, we'd like you to review 02, not 01, the new version. We uploaded 2 versions. The second version, because the second version has this word change. It doesn't avoid using pitfalls at all. Goes back to the original words we had, and I think this is pretty much good for comments. Do you have any more slides? Oh, I told you what was in it. Okay, this stuff's in it. And this as well, without the pitfalls, because the pitfalls is now removed. One thing I did do, which may potentially confuse people, is I moved the bleaching and middle box requirements earlier in the document because I put it with deployment issues, because I thought this was a deployment thing that you should tell people not to bleach ECN. So I didn't put it at the end when we talked about mechanisms. Okay, anything else? Any conclusions? Norm issues? Please read and comment. We think this is ready to go to working group last call.
And Brian's going to do a review of it in working group last call.
Yes, I will.
Good.
I mean, my name's already on the list, so I figured I might as well get up. So hi, Brian Trammell. I had a question about sort of the scope of the challenges. I guess we're not calling them pitfalls anymore. How crazy and paranoid do you want the challenges to be?
I want the challenges to be motivating the use of ECN. This is a statement to people that we should be using ECN. It's not a statement that all the problems have gone away. The IETF will not be working on it. In fact, I intend to write drafts about ECN and to make it better and to make it work effectively, which I think is a little bit of that challenge. But
so concrete example, if a challenge to ECN deployment is that turning on ECN may cause routers that are doing equal cost multipath routing based on hashing the toss byte to break TCP Anycast, is that a use? The look on your face is correct. But
TCP Anycast is already broken.
TCP Anycast is asking because after I tweeted something about the talk I gave in ICCRG, I got called out on Twitter about breaking the internet for telling people to turn it on because it would break TCP Anycast when you're bleaching or when you're hashing on the toss byte. So many things are wrong with that I can't even start. Actually, literally every word. Hashing on the toss byte. Yeah, there is equipment that does that. He built some of it. Yeah. Well, so the point that I'm making is that if we're talking about, okay, well, we're thinking about all of the problems and we're pointing people at this document, there are people in the community who will say ECN is broken because crazy thing that I want to do that I saw once, or I have some broken equipment, or I had a bad idea and I'm continuing to do the bad idea. I don't know that we want to put that in there, but if this is supposed to be the one-stop shop, where's the line?
I don't think we should talk about whether ECN works with ST2. Honestly. And anything else either that is already broken. And stuff that's broken is broken, and it needs to be going to be fixed.
I tend to agree with that. I just wanted to get the room's into that.
Yeah, sure. That's my opinion.
Andrew McGregor. As far as I know, we haven't had a consensus call or any kind of converging discussion on the question of, is the position of ECN marking is equivalent to drop correct, and what do we want to do about trying to make things that react to high rate ECN deployable? Now, that seems to be a challenge for this document in some respect, but I'm not sure how it applies.
Okay, it's a challenge in getting ECN correct, and I think that is still a work in progress. So yes,
exactly.
We do have to choose it, and we've made some recommendations in the AQM recommendations for things that might need to change and things that might need more research, and some of these are ECN related. And if people believe us and they start turning it on, we better get on and finish these things as well. We could decide not to publish this because we believe that we have to do all the work first, and then you can work out the motivation for actually doing the work.
That precise question is one of the reasons why none of the documents or implementations about either CODL or FQCODL say anything about ECN. They probably should, but without kind of resolving that question, there's no way of deciding what they should do.
There's more work to be done, yeah, sure, I hear.
So I got a chair perspective on that, in that, that this isn't supposed to be a spec for ECN. You're not modifying, anything about ECN. It's about explaining to people why they might want to use it. So it would be the wrong place, actually, if we had guidance about that to stuff it.
But it might be a good thing to mention in the challenges section
Agreed.
and encourage people to turn up and talk about it.
Yeah.
But okay, right. Is this the place where we start doing the challenges stuff? I mean, this is an informational document about what you get if you manage to make it work. But we can talk about this, and this is fine.
Maybe could have been a completely different topic.
Okay.
Can you further? So I should have probably brought up this earlier, but I haven't been here at the last meeting. So there's a section saying benefits when you mark ECN earlier.
There is.
Yeah, which I don't really understand.
Oh. You mean marking ECN earlier? You don't understand how you can mark earlier?
No, that I understand. I don't understand how you can get benefits from it. So my understanding is if you mark ECN earlier, you will just reduce your congestion into earlier, and so the other flow who gets a later drop will just use all the capacity, and you will not be able to get any of the capacity, which might be beneficial for the operation of the network, probably not, but it's definitely not beneficial for the one who's using ECN.
You're near a microphone. There's a proper.
Shall we remove this section?
That's the easy solution, I'm sure.
I think there are benefits, and I think we could try and enumerate them, but maybe they could be done in academic papers and research, and we could go that way and make this section a little bit shorter. I mean, that's the thing for this working group to decide.
Oh, well, Prisca, I guess the thing Kuhn presented in ICCRG was a way to mark ECN earlier and not lose out to drop. So it just needs maybe embellishing rather than moving. You know, to say that you can't just do that naively. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Right, remember this is a manifesto document, not a technical spec, so we should probably be able to sort this one out in this room by carrying on talking.
And as an example, if you feed a DC TCP and a Reno flow, both of which support ECN, into an FQ correl modified to do ECN instead of drop, they'll balance out fairly. What? FQ correl, yes. But Q can auto tune the marking rate.
Yeah, where all of the value comes from FQ.
It must
Yes.
be hashed into the same. A lot of the value comes from FQ, but in this particular case, the correl is going to decide on the right marking rate that each flow wants to get to where the FQ feels it should be. Now, I mean, you can argue about that's the right thing to do, but that's what ought to happen in the case.
If they went up.
So you can have benefits in two cases. Either you need two different queues. I'm not sure if this is meant by this case. I don't think that's what you meant.
I think two different queues in my terminology is scheduling.
Yeah.
And that's integrally tied up with the performance we were just talking about.
And the other way is that you use a completely different congestion control for the ECN-enabled flow, and that needs also some kind of agreement, standardization between the AQM and the end system, because both need to know that they have to do something different, and I don't think that's something we have right now, so I'm not sure if it should go into this document. I mean, I would happy if people think about it, but I'm not sure if it should go in this document.
No, I want this conversation. It's good. Oh, Michael, you want to say something?
I do want to answer it. Okay, so it's been said that this is not supposed to be a specification. The specification exists and recommends for now to mark where you would otherwise drop, and I think we should not change that or propose to change that in the spec and remove any text that says anything about possibly marking earlier. That would be more right.
With the caveat that we should talk about what mark when you should, what would otherwise drop means mark when an AQM would otherwise drop, rather than drop tail. Yeah, well, we can just explain this, I think, because this is a common misconception that it's the same as a drop tail router. It's the same as an AQM router.
Maybe, okay, I agree. I would still like to see like a side remark. If you change this spec saying you have to do the same like drop anymore, if you change it and you change also the congestion control, you can have additional benefits. Just make a note somewhere that there's more work coming up which might be interesting or something like that. That would be, I think that would be nice, because if people read this, they say, okay, that's basically all stuff we knew, but what's the real benefit behind it?
Okay, let me just try 1 second longer if I can. Is it a new benefit or is it a greater benefit only? Because the benefits we already outlined in some top level describing the different ways you can benefit. I believe what you're saying actually is a good thing, and I've got research also in this space, but it actually just increases the benefit in those particular cases.
Say of the whole system, if you have a different AQM and a different congestion control, then there's a new benefit that might be low delay. Because today's congestion control needs a certain amount of buffering to actually reach high utilization, and if you want to have high utilization and low delay, you might need to change both, but I'm not sure, that might not belong in the document.
Okay, so the low delay is better realized because you can make it low delay again. Right, okay. I don't want to do that. Okay, Michael, what we will do what with the text? Yep, we'll remove this bit. That's what I thought you'd say.
I mean, anyway, I agreed to review it, and so if I have an idea where we can add like one sentence, I will just let you know.
All comments are welcome. We're trying to do the structural changes here that are useful. Are there any other topics? Because we'll happily consider them.
Doesn't look like it.
Okay, so that looks like we need Rev 3, and then I will assert that Rev 3 contains all the feedback which we might put into this, and therefore that version should get a reviewer or go to working group last call.
It will go to working group last call.
Thank you.
Okay. So, Andrew, you would just want to say briefly status on CODL? No slides, right?
Yeah, no slides. I'll use this mic because it's closer. The CODL draft, we have, at this point, we have a number of known editorial changes that need to be made, a whole bunch of reference nits and a few other such things. But in its current form, it's kind of ready for review, understanding that there are some known editorial issues, particularly with references. And when those are resolved, we believe it'll be ready for last call. So if anybody wants to read it and comment now, that's perfectly fine, and it won't be too long, like order a handful of weeks before we have a new version that will have the editorial issues we already know about resolved, and that should be, ready for serious review.
Okay, great.
Janai, I'll just add very quickly that we're going to try and add something to the experiences section if we can find more information there as well. If anybody has any data that they can provide to us to add in the experience section, that would be fantastic to have.
Okay.
Michael Weissel, I have some reservations about the behavior that happens when it enters this drop node, the part with the square root. I've seen strange things, and I can share them offline and we can have a discussion about it, but I think I would like to have more justification about this part. Not the part when it first drops, but the repeated dropping.
The idea with this document is to document CODL as it was originally published and is out there in the wild, rather than do further development on it. Now, further algorithm development is a good thing, and we'd certainly like to know about that and probably publish it. It would also be nice to know how that if you can observe that same behavior in FQ CODL for the same reason.
And I don't want to get in the way of the process here of documenting what's there, so I think that's a very good thing to do. So
I think it might have a section, or maybe I suggested adding one already on future work and other research, because it certainly mentions a number of places in the document some other things that could be poked into, and maybe this is just a candidate for that list.
Yes, we could do that.
And just to remind you, that there was a mail I wrote reviewing CODL on the list that I think you promised to answer at some point. Maybe 2 years ago now. I sent it to Kathy Nichols and Van, and no one ever answered it, and then you said you'd have a go at answering it.
It's being coddled. Unless there's anything else, that's all we had for today. Thank you for coming and participating, and we look forward to all the last call reviews.
And I've noted everybody who has been on the mic to be one of the reviewers. That was not a joke.
Most of that anyway.